was accustomed on some level with dealing with forest fires and also living in the mountains, sometimes dealing with power outages. You know, those were just kind of part of our life in a rural community. But as we came down here, you know, I never thought that wildfire would be an issue that we would all have to contend with as a community. We all know that house fires are an issue and there's concerns and things that we can do to make sure our houses stay safe. But as far as community wildfire, that was not something that was on my mind. And I know I personally, along with all of you, watched in horror when fire blew through Santa Rosa, jumped 101, burned entire neighborhoods to the ground. It didn't matter wealthy or not wealthy, it just annihilated entire neighborhoods. And then the Atlas fire came and it was looking up here into Solano County, up on the Green Valley side, and it was really threatening, and over in the Vacaville area, it was really beginning to threaten the outskirts of part of Solano County as well. And I remember the Green Valley in particular, because I live in Cordelia, just watching it. You all remember the smoke, it was difficult to breathe, you probably stay indoors, close your windows, lock your doors, try to minimize the kind of particulate matter that we're getting to your lungs and how it would affect our health. All the while watching on that fire and making sure that we didn't have to evacuate. And then of course last year with Paradise, losing the campfire and losing an entire community. 85 people. So the reality is we know we have earthquakes here. There's a potential for all kinds of different kinds of emergency disasters that we might have to respond to. And when the fire hit over here by the Carquinez Bridge, and I was in communication with friends, people were saying, I don't know where to go. Where do we go? We're getting evacuated. We don't have power. And it really occurred to me that there wasn't a clear place of what residents should do, where they should go, other than in places where they're being evacuated. The people that were being evacuated were told, definitely you need to evacuate. But there just seemed to be like a lot of confusion from the individuals that I talked to and as I was searching online. I know with the PG&E power outages or with Alert Solano, you know, you get these notices, but you actually have to go type in your address to see if you're going to be affected by it. So while some of those are helpful, if we have time, they also add a layer of, you know, technology requirements that becomes challenging. So because I really believe that we need to do everything we can to keep ourselves and our neighbors and our loved ones safe, I felt it would be valuable to host a emergency preparedness forum like this. I did a community wildfire preparedness event in Green Valley, and from that, because Green Valley, the Upperland Green Valley Highlands, they actually, if a fire got started there, they would probably go like Paradise Valley because the vegetation is so dense. And we have formed a fire safe council. And from that fire safe council, we're working on becoming a fire-wise site. Once you become a fire-wise site, you can actually draw down resources to cut fuel breaks. So it's just ways that we can leverage information to inform ourselves, or by kind of forming coalitions, the way we can draw down resources to mitigate some of those risks by removing some of the vegetation and trees for the fuel breaks that might put particular communities at risk. Today, I just mostly want to have an opportunity for you to know what to do in terms of emergency preparedness. And I'm really very pleased that one to host this and with all the co-sponsors, and I just want to acknowledge them quickly here. First of all, let's give Florence Douglas a round of applause. It's a great community place, and if you remember the earthquake in Napa, they actually were here as a site for people to come. They've served an instrumental role under their leadership. We also have Solano County Emergency Medical Services. We have Ted Selby and Don Boggs, and they're going to be talking to you about some of their lessons learned on emergency preparedness. We have with us, you may know, as a public information officer, Kevin Brown, but he's also the interim emergency preparedness coordinator, or emergency response. Emergency medical services. And he'll be talking more locally around the evacuation. What happens in the event of evacuation, and what does the local jurisdictions do? We also have, because so many people, in particular who are elderly, as we get older, there's various things that might impede our ability to be prepared or evacuate quickly, like if we're using a walker, or Or do we remember to get our medications? And there's just a lot of different aspects to that. As people really get in advanced years, they may become, or they don't drive anymore. And what do you do if you don't drive and you're supposed to be evacuating, you have no way to evacuate? So I have both Cindy Unger from Comfort Keepers. She's going to talk a little bit about the senior preparedness site. She's got a little exercise for us to do.
Apex Care, sorry, Apex Care.
Oh, I'm sorry, Apex Care, sorry, Apex Care. And then we have Nicole Howell, she's the Executive Director of Ombudsman. So she's going to talk about emergency preparedness for long-term care. So, oh, thank you. And that's much better, thank you. And in addition, United Rentals actually is helping us by putting together some of that preparedness kit. I hope you took a raffle ticket. They have some great things to raffle off at the end of the day. We have a wonderful lantern that opens up. These are the kinds of, some of the things that you need to have in your go kits, right, for our emergency preparedness. Little battery packs that help keep your cell phones charged. You're going to learn a little bit that sometimes our cell phones aren't always reliable in the case of an emergency. We may lose cell signals as well, and so these are the things that we need to think about and consider. I want to start off, and I don't know, I may have to just start off by giving you over to Ted Selby and Dawn Boggs while I try to get the connection back on the display. And so with that, let's welcome Solano County Emergency Medical Services.
Thanks, Rochelle. I appreciate it very much. You know, one of the things my staff will tell you, and anybody that knows me will tell you, is offer me a microphone and I will be there. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. To talk. Oh, we actually had slides for a second there, didn't we? Oh, we do. Very cool. We have slides. So that's awesome. So anyhow, my name is Ted Selby, and I'm the Emergency Medical Services Administrator for Solano County. I came to Solano County back in 2007. Before I joined the ranks of Solano County Public Health at the Solano County Department of Health and Social Services, I worked at the state of California. I worked at the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. I worked for the Department of Health Services. I worked for the Department of Mental Health, and I worked for the California Highway Patrol. So I have a long-standing history in emergency management and emergency preparedness. I've worked through a lot of different emergencies. I'm joined today by...
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dawn Boggs. I'm the project manager for Solano County Emergency Preparedness and Response. And since it looks like we have slides, I'll go ahead and get started. I'll just stay able to put that together. Yes, let's see if I put that. If not, I'll do this one.
And you're on tonight.
Okay, I'll just take this slide. Okay. That's all. Well, we can plan for emergencies. We can't really plan for them. And what I mean by that is we don't know when the next wildfire is going to spark. We don't know when the next earthquake is going to occur. Or we don't know when the next flood will happen. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we need to be prepared. The next slide, please.
So as you can see, we're doing the Abbott and Costello pass the microphone thing here. So who's on first? Oh, that wrong routine. So anyhow, some of you might remember, not that long ago, it was 2009, we had a pandemic. Prior to that, the last pandemic was the Spanish flu back in 1914. So does anybody remember in 2009, 2010, H1N1, the pandemic that we had a lot of people very scared about? We have Garland Brinkley back there who kind of headed the response for Touro University, and I worked very closely with him. That's actually when we became very well acquainted, was in responding to that. I want to tell you just a quick little story about it before we get too into the preparedness piece of it. Back in April of 2009, I was actually hosting a cross-sector tabletop exercise. And what happens is government entities exercise. They pull together groups of people representing different agencies like the fire departments, the police departments, emergency response agencies. In this case, I had libraries, I had businesses, I had educational institutions. We all were together. This was the biggest tabletop exercise that had been facilitated. The scenario that we had was H5N1, which is a different strain of flu than what we actually were faced with. It was avian influenza, or the bird flu. What we ended up responding to was swine flu, or H1N1. But anyway, getting back to the story, I pulled all these people together and I had this elaborate scenario, and we went through it, and I had about 120 people up at Touro University in what they call Farragut Hall, which is the old officers club at Mare Island. And so I had all these people there, and we were talking about what we would do if somebody went over to Asia and contracted bird flu and came back to the United States. And I had them come to Travis, and they actually were living in Vallejo. And so we went through all the steps, and we all had great answers about what we would do. So we were getting ready to dismiss the group, and I had representatives from the California Department of Public Health attending this exercise, and they raised their hand and they said, "Hey, we've got an announcement." And I said, "Great, why don't you stand up and share your announcement with us?" And he said, "A case of swine influenza has been diagnosed down in Southern California." And none of us really thought anything about it. We were like, "Oh, okay." And it came over an alert system called the California Health Alert Network, which is a system that's in place for government officials and the like to receive these notifications. And so we all went about our business and we left, and I thanked everybody for being there. The next day, on the TV stations, you may remember this, down in Mexico, they were broadcasting live feed of like hundreds of people with masks on their faces and wandering, trying to fight each other and this kind of stuff. And it was H1N1. But we came to find out that those were kind of staged, but nonetheless, we did have H1N1. So I bring this up because emergencies come in different shapes and sizes, right? Catastrophes, catastrophic events come in different shapes and sizes. When we're talking about communicable disease, there are different ways that things are treated. So in 2009, when the disease or the virus was first identified and started spreading, we got supplies of antivirals, which, because there was no vaccine, there was no cure for it, so we got large supplies of antivirals that we stockpiled, and if somebody contracted H1N1 and was, deathly ill, we could give them these antivirals that the hospitals would run out of, and we at the government had some supplies to be able to help if supplies ran low. Then, of course, you've all heard of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or as we refer to them, the CDC. They were quickly trying to get a vaccine developed. They got it developed in a much speedier time than usual, probably about April, May, June, July, August, I think maybe about 6 months. So it was really a pretty quick development. And we set up vaccination clinics for people who were scared, who wanted to get vaccinated to protect themselves from getting this pandemic strain of virus. This picture is actually from Georgia Street. You guys know where Georgia Street is? Yeah! I rented an old bank on Georgia Street where, with Touro's help, I set up clinics to operate on a daily basis for months so that we could try to vaccinate everybody as they were available. And we opened them up on weekends as well. Touro University covered Sundays because, as many of you know, they're a Jewish institution, so they helped us with covering Sundays. And Saturdays were very easy to get covered by my staff because they liked overtime. So it worked out pretty well. So in any case, we got lots of people vaccinated, and the virus has kind of We are still seeing some cases of it here and there, but for the most part, it's gone away. And we had a very successful response in a public health sense of things. So things have gone very well with that. Don, you want to move to the next slide? So that was talking about communicable disease and H1N1. So do some of you remember a place called Casa de Vallejo on Sonoma Boulevard? Well, we're going back in time instead of moving forward. This was in 2008. I had been in Solano County for less than a year, and I come to work one morning, and everybody was like really concerned because Casa de Vallejo, an independent care facility in Vallejo, had gone up in flames. It was a pretty serious fire, and that was home. Casa de Vallejo was home to quite a number of elderly individuals. Many of them had mobility impairments and couldn't easily get in and out of their apartments. The fire department, and we have a fire department representative here who's going to be talking to you in a little bit, did a fantastic job of getting those people evacuated from that building. They got them moved. Some of you might remember the First Baptist Church, which is just a couple of doors down on Sonoma Boulevard. Well, guess what? They opened their doors at like 4 in the morning to the firefighters who were evacuating the building to get all of the folks in there. And I didn't get down there until about 7:30 in the morning. At that time I lived in Winters. It was a little bit of a drive, and I didn't really realize what was happening. And by the time I came into the office and heard what was going on, I headed right down to Vallejo just to make sure I could try to help organize things because it would be chaotic. You know, what I learned is that we are so lucky to have the community that we have here in Vallejo. Kaiser, I hear people complain about Kaiser all the time. You know, I was born at Kaiser in Vallejo. Yes, believe it or not, none of the buildings that stand today. The building I was born in is long since gone. But I was born here. I am so proud to be able to say that. I'm a Kaiser member. I'm proud to be able to say that because one of the big lessons that we learned when we talk about evacuating quickly from a building, and now that I'm in my 50s and I'm on maintenance medications, I know this is really important. We have to have our medications. We're supposed to take them every day. And a lot of people had to leave with about 2 seconds notice and get out of there so that they could keep their life. They couldn't gather their important belongings. They couldn't get their medicine. So they left without it. Kaiser came down to the First Baptist Church with a physician, a pharmacist, and a pharmacy technician. Did not ask these people what their health insurance was. Did not ask them what kind of coverage do you have. Didn't ask them, do you have a Kaiser card? None of those questions were posed. They said, what health conditions do you have? What medicine do you take? And the reason they had a physician there and a pharmacist and a pharmacy technician was so that they could work with the people who don't have such great recollection today, you know? I don't remember things as well as I used to. Where did I put my phone? Oh, here it is. So anyway, I share that with you because in an emergency, it's about coming together. It really is. And so during H1N1, we came together. You heard about the partnerships with Troy University. I used the Sheriff's Department, the fire departments to help me with different aspects of the response. With Casa de Vallejo, fire department did their part. They evacuated, they put out the flames. Public health did their part. The older and disabled adult services came down. They helped people find places to stay while they didn't have an apartment to stay in. Kaiser, private entity, came down, helped make sure people had medications so that they could have their daily meds. We came together. That's the key when it comes to emergency preparedness and planning. So when it comes, but that doesn't take us off the hook, right? We still need to plan for things. We still need to do our part. So I highly encourage you to keep your medications, keep a supply of them to run with you out the door when you have to evacuate quickly. Speaking of which, next slide. We were talking about a structure fire. Rochelle mentioned this. A couple of years later, well actually just a couple of years ago, we had the Atlas fire. I was down at the Emergency Operations Center down in Fairfield, downtown Fairfield. We're trying to coordinate for receiving evacuees from the Sonoma Developmental Center. Anybody heard of that? Yeah, it used to be Sonoma State Hospital, but that changed quite a number of years ago, and now it's the Sonoma Developmental Center. They were evacuated. They had to find a place to go. We were able to set up an alternate care site for them out at the Dixon Fairgrounds. Got them plenty far away from the fire into a big enough facility where they could be treated and taken care of out of danger. Well, while I'm there working on that, working on getting N95 respirators to people who needed them and stuff, Dawn was busy helping plan for the local residents and evacuating them to shelters. And we learned so much there, didn't we? Next slide, and here's the mic.
Cardio in. It was during this time that we learned so much about what people's priorities are. Here's what we learned. We learned that our shelter plan as currently written does not really meet the needs of Solano County's population. Our residents love their family members, including their pets. We need to account for medical and health needs in the shelter that houses healthy folks, and we also need to make sure that there is room for the pets. This three-pronged approach is what we are working on now. In addition to taking advantage of talking to groups of people about being prepared and spreading the word about planning to take care of yourself and your pets during an emergency, for those folk who are interested in helping others, we are reviving our MRC, or Medical Reserve Corps. The name of our corps is Solano HEART, which stands for Solano Healthcare Emergency Auxiliary Response Team. If you or someone you know might be interested in joining, please pick up some information at the resource table there in the back over here on my left. And lastly, we already talked about how we are working to revise the shelter plan. And that concludes our presentation for you today. I will now open the floor for questions.
So if you have any questions, feel free to, I'm going to leave the microphone with Dawn. I mean, I like using it, but I don't really need it. God kind of gave me this built-in PA system in my throat, so I imagine you all can hear me, right? Yeah, I see the heads in the back of the room nod. Yep, we hear you, Tim. So I want to share with you a couple of other quick things. So, you know, Teddy Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have where you are. Has anybody heard that quote before? That's really what it boils down to when you're responding to an emergency. You've got to make do with what you have, because until other resources get there, you don't have an opportunity. So we really need to do our planning so we have a lot of resources available to us. Bobby Kennedy said, some men look at things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask, why not? I share that sentiment. I am trying to look at what we can do to prepare for whatever is going to come our way. During Loma Prieta, and you hear me talk about all these things because I've been doing this a while. Pretty soon, you know, I'll have a protege taking it on, and they won't have all these stories to tell until they get old. But in Loma Prieta, you know, we lost cell phone service. We lost telephone service. You know what we had to do? We had to turn on our car radios. Yeah, I know, you're going, radio? What do you mean? I'm listening to, you know, iTunes in my car. Well, there used to be a thing on the dashboard called a radio. And we listened to that. We heard music and news on it. There's still radios out there, radio frequencies. Tune to it. In Solano County, 95.3 KUIC is the station where you will get local emergency updates. So I share that with you. Pardon me? FM. 95.3 FM. KUIC, that's right, quick 95.3. Tune in the morning with John, and sometimes you'll hear Ted because he invites him to sit with him occasionally. So, that said, let me open it up to any questions you might have, and then we'll get out of the way here. So I have one here and then one here.
One of the things in my concern is in emergencies when the PG&E shuts you down for 3 days. What about the people who use CPAPs that absolutely need that, or they can die during the night? What do you do then?
You know, that is a really good question, and my personal opinion is that we shouldn't have the problem to begin with. We're the only state that does this, but that's an opinion. That doesn't help us, right? So what we need is we need to have some sort of a resource center where individuals can go if they have apparatus that needs to be powered. And I know that I was speaking with the director of the Office of Emergency Services for this county, for Solano County, actually his assistant, the assistant director, and she told me that they had set up a center just like that in Vallejo the last time that they had a PSPS overnight shutdown, and nobody showed up. But there may have been a reason for that, because the power was coming back on shortly thereafter, and it had been announced. So that could have been why people neglected to get up and pack up their stuff and go. I have one question, then I'll come to you. So I think we're looking at doing that now, is my understanding. It's not an EMS issue, it's more an I say EMS, I'm sorry. Acronyms are something that emergency people use a lot. EMS is Emergency Medical Services, and OES is Office of Emergency Services, and to most people that would sound like the same thing. But what I do is I oversee the trauma center programs and the ambulance services and things like that. The Office of Emergency Services deals with more like the earthquakes and fires and floods. And I have implications in those because there are people with medical needs and stuff, and so we have to work very closely together, but they kind of take the lead on that. So my understanding is that's the plan moving forward. We want to get PG&E to help us pay for those centers and make them available to the folks who need them. Yes?
I have a pretty loud voice. Comment and a question.
Hey, you can be my partner.
I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was when the Cartesius Bridge was engulfed in fire. Anyway, my power was out and I had no online, the Comcast was out. And so I called the library to find out what radio station I could go out to my car and listen to.
Perfect.
And it took him a long time to find it, the reference set. A long time, and then I went out there and it was just the general Bay Area news. There was nothing about our area. It was very frustrating. So I didn't get anything from that, but I'll try it again.
Well, I appreciate the feedback because I know the people at the radio station and I will talk with them about it. So yes, and
They
the
come
rest.
in like every 15 minutes and say,
Yeah, just give an update.
yeah.
Sure.
And the question is, I bet there's a lot of us seniors who are retired and years ago, like for instance, I was works in site nursing and Amistad Hospital
Oh.
for 20 hours, which site nursing includes basic nursing, like
Yes.
LVN level. But might have some issues like low stress level or whatever. And like, it'd be nice if there was 2 levels of emergency response volunteers. Like one that were like fully functioning and recently like certified or whatever. And then some that would need like backup if it's a huge emergency and you need as many helpers as you can get.
We will take you, and Dawn would love to get your information immediately following this.
So I want to help if you don't have enough helpers. But I
Thank
wouldn't be one of the first, you know.
But we want your help, because when that day comes, we need you. Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so we'll
Yes.
take one more and then we'll have
I'll
one
get
more
out.
speaker.
From last time, from my cell phone, PG&E has this link, and it says that there's relief center at Fairground, which is very close to where I live. So I drove there, there's nothing, nobody. So I want to make sure if there is a relief center at Fairground, just across this Six Flags.
So our fire department might know too.
Very involved in the city.
So PG&E set up the power center. They had chargers, they had batteries, they had flashlights, and it wasn't well marked at the fairgrounds. So when you went into gate 4, and I understand this is usually where they're going to set these things up, it was a couple of tents and a generator, but it wasn't well signed. So if you come into the fairgrounds, and this is all going to change, obviously, but you need to look for signage that may have blown down because of the wind event. That was what the problem was. But they were over where the old racetrack was. That was the location, but it wasn't visible. But my understanding is that's where it was set up. Again, until we have them.
So let's hope next time there will be better signs.
Or they may blow away. They were signed at that point, but that's some feedback that we get.
I just went there to check.
Yeah, and you could get your CPAP recharged there.
I need.
Yeah, so they had power strips. The center here was open, we'd opened up Amador, trying to get folks so that they could get their power back.
So from a,
Recharged.
Shelley, from a city perspective, where would people go? Because as I was tracking, the PG&E Resource Center was the one spot. They didn't refer to it as an evacuation center, yet people were being evacuated. There was nothing that I saw going around an evacuation center per se. Maybe it wasn't set up, but what does the city have?
Ken may be able to address that
Okay.
better, but the evacuation process on that day was so limited.
Okay.
It wasn't a wide area, and it was like so fast.
Okay.
Had the power gone out further, we were already prepared to open up Amador Fairgrounds. We had 3 other sites identified to take that.
And then so then the source where people would go for that information here locally.
The city website, the Everbridge and Nixle alerts. We were talking with Solano County at that point. So those, the problem was, if you had AT&T, you couldn't get your cell phone. If you had Sprint, you may have cell phone coverage. So radio, Noble.
We need to make
Find out
sure
how
that
the
those
operating radios.
updates are there. Thank you.
Would you mind holding your question until we, like, Kevin will be able to?
It's a-
Oh, is it on? Okay.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. About cell phone service, they find that even though you cannot make phone calls, a lot of times text messaging will still go through.
Yeah.
When the Carquinez fire happened, I lived within walking distance of there, it did not happen for me, I had T-Mobile. But my neighbors were able to do it, with theirs. That's just a thought for people who, with cell phone services. So I could go on about it.
Oh, fabulous. Well, good. So please continue your comments. I want us to go on because we have some other
Thank you.
speakers, but let's give Ted and Dawn up. One of the things I did also want to your question, the Governor Newsom set up a hotline for non-emergencies, and this is developed to help medically vulnerable Californians and health and community care facilities and resources in the event of largely the planned power outages, but also in emergencies would work. And so it's at the bottom of your agenda here, And then there's also the website. It's the U.S. Department of Homeland Defense website for ready.gov. Actually has a tremendous amount of resources there, just generally. But the California phone number is 833-284-3473, and that's for non-emergency hotline state of California for planned power outages. And so it would answer some of those questions for people who may be stranded, who have no ability to get out, managing with medical equipment, worried about medical equipment, etc. And then the other thing, because of all of the work that I've done with seniors for so many years, what I know is that not every person has a smartphone. And sometimes if they have a smartphone, they don't know how to use it, or they don't use it because that wasn't what they grew up with, and so they don't utilize it. And so a lot of our emergency preparedness alerts are all through smartphone technology or through online technology, and it becomes one of those potential barriers. And so I just want us to be thoughtful about that, that we don't make the assumption that everybody has the ability to do that smartphone technology. And we look out for one another, because I know a lot of people who don't. And in some cases, it's also an income issue, right? How much you can pay for all of that. So anyway, what I want to do is move on to emergency solutions for seniors. And Cindy Unger with Apex Care is just going to talk just for a few minutes about some special considerations. But as she's coming up here, I wanted to point out a few things to you. First of all, this personal emergency preparedness plan here, this is a very detailed emergency preparedness plan. It can be for you, your family member, or if you're a caregiver. It's really around identifying who's your caregiver, what medication needs do you have, what's your medical equipment, contact information. And the goal would be that as you're hearing some of this information, it might help you fill out some of this. Would really love for all of you to walk out with at least some idea of a plan. And also, and I won't go over the go bag because Cindy's got a little bit of an exercise to go with you and then I'll cover it. But it's important for us to be prepared. We've already heard a couple of instances where we're relying on government for something, for a response, or when we're relying on a sign being there to find our way to the resource center, and in the reality, the wind blows it down, it's not there. So we really have to become as much, not totally self-sufficient, but do our best so that we're prepared to respond in that emergency. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, and you got about 5 minutes.
Somebody took my other 5 minutes.
That would be me. I'm sorry.
So, I'm probably going to take 7, so I'm sorry to the next person. Kidding. I'll take 5 minutes. I just wanted to thank Rochelle so much. I met Rochelle when she was a coordinator with or consultant with the Senior Coalition in Solano County. And just the work that she has done for and with seniors in the past 3.5 years that I've known her. Huge thank you to you for always being in the fight with us here. So speaking of that, this preparation, there's a reason we prepare early. Like the gentleman said, we don't know when things are going to happen. They will happen. They will happen at some point, and our success in this is going to be dependent on if we are prepared to deal with this. One of the things, I work on disaster preparedness in Solano County and also in Yolo County, which is my home county. And one of the things that we're telling seniors over and over and over is to make the plan. So some of the things I've heard today is, where do you get your information? How do you know what's going on? All these forms here, there's an alert here, there's Nixle, there's Everbridge. Please take the time beforehand to go onto these sites. You can have them call your home phone, you can have them call your cell phone, you can have them text you. There are a variety of ways that you can know with as much notice as possible about any emergencies that might be affecting you. Making a plan. Who is responsible to make the plan for you? You. For you, you. So everybody in this room has a different need for their plan. Some people have mobility issues. Some people have hearing challenges. Some people have pets. Some people have things that they will not want to leave. I'm going to grab one of the things that is really in my emergency kit. This is my dad's baseball glove. okay? Not everybody would grab this. It's in my emergency kit, okay? Some of these other little silly things like the badminton racket are not. But I will tell you, if I'm in a smoke-filled room and I have 30 seconds to grab what I need in an emergency, it's going to be like this. Okay, this is whatever this is. Okay, I'm taking whatever this is. I'm taking whatever this is. And I better be pretty certain that this is a can of something that I'm going to want to eat for 3 days. Because this is what I'm going to be responsible for. That's why this is in my emergency kit. One of the things that I've noticed for seniors is with your emergency kits, I have mine. Now, when I had my children, I had it in a big barrel that I could pick up and put in my car. I'm 60 now. I can't do that anymore. So my emergency kits then went into 2 smaller containers. My mom's emergency kit, when I packed hers, goes into a suitcase so that she can drag it or she can roll it if she's rolling it in, on flat ground, or she can drag it if she's dragging it over something that's an earthquake site or something like that. So she is prepared. My mother, I helped her prepare. I helped her get onto Everbridge and join Nixle, so she gets all of these alerts citywide, countywide. I'm on hers and all of my clients in Solano County and my clients in Yolo County that I serve. So if there's an emergency in Solano County and you're an Apex Care client, I'm going to know where you live and what your needs are, because that's part of what we do. But please don't rely on me any more than you're going to rely on government to take care of you. I might not be able to get to you either. My road might be blocked to get to you. So the things that you need to take care of yourself for 3 days, I love some of the information that's in the back. There are 2 pages. Now, does everyone know and can find in 30 seconds a battery-operated radio in their home? Can everyone get their hand sanitizer, all their credit cards, and their health insurance card and hearing aid batteries in 30 seconds in a smoke-filled room? No one can do that. You can have the speediest, fastest person in the world, and they can't do that. So prepare these things early. It's going to be so much better for you in the event of an emergency. You were talking about the Sonoma Developmental Center when they were evacuated for the second time. They went to one site first, and then that site was compromised, and then they ended up in Dixon. Well, I went just as a volunteer because I knew I could help in some way, shape, or form. I snuck in with an old Red Cross badge. You do what you have to do to get in the door. And I found that these people didn't have incontinence supplies. They did not have changes of clothing, and it was cold. And once someone had soiled themselves, there were no extra changes of clothing. Luckily, they had somebody who doesn't take no for an answer at Walmart when I want to clean out all their, their sweatpants and their sweatshirts and all of that, and I'll pay you later. Well, thank God, Walmart and Dixon, hallelujah. They were very sweet about that. I did pay them later. But, these are things, and these are things that really needed to happen. And we have a speaker later on that will be talking about how they are mandated to happen, that people are ready to go who are in institutional care. And even the people who had folks who were supposed to take care of them didn't have everything they needed. They had a lot. They had a lot. And I was so grateful of the people that were there taking care of them and all their equipment and the National Guard loading, 3,000-pound generators on their trucks and dragging them all the way to Dixon. But it was very heartbreaking to see the normal things, like a change of clothing, that these people did not have. It was heartbreaking. So please, I'm asking you to prepare yourselves. Important documents. This is old school. If you want to do old school and make copies of things, you can also put them on thumb drives. You don't have to put them in your emergency kit if you're storing them off-site. If your daughter lives 4 houses down, don't assume that her house is going to be untouched and your house is going to be demolished. So make sure that your off-site storage of anything that you need for emergency documentation is far enough away that it's not going to be in an affected zone either. If you have a mobility issue, hearing loss, a vision issue, or need to evacuate with pets, please plan for those things ahead of time. If I'm your neighbor and I live next door, come over and introduce yourself to me and let me know that you might need help in an emergency situation. And ask me if I can please come knock on your door. If there's an emergency, can you please knock on my door and check on me? You know, it might be something that you don't want to do. You're an independent person. You are a proud person, but it could save your life. In some of these instances, it's our neighbors. It's not our government. They're doing other things for the good of the whole. It's your neighbor who's going to save your life right next to you. So plan for that. And then plan for your pets. There are many opportunities now, because we know now that people will not leave without their pets. There are many opportunities to have our pets cared for, and then we're reunited with them after the emergency. So please, make a kit, make a plan, and be informed of where you're going to get your information and how you're going to get information to your loved ones who are going to be very concerned about you and trying to reach you in the event of an emergency. So thank you very much.
Talk a little bit about the different kinds of medications that are cool, things like that.
Yeah, and with your medications, there are a few medications that need to be cooled. So some of the diabetic medications, actually some of the older diabetic medications, you need to refrigerate. So just make sure that you have cold packs in your refrigerator. That might be something that, you're not going to be able to store that ahead of time. That might be something that you're grabbing. But know the 2 or 3 things in an emergency situation that you're going to need to grab. If it's in the middle of the night, you don't have an extra CPAP machine. You're going to grab the one that you're using. You're going to grab the medication that's in the refrigerator. And then you're going to go. And you're going to grab your dog and you're going to be at the door. There are very few things, I will tell you, in an emergency situation that someone in this community cannot get for you. But you have to know where to go. You have to know who those people are, and you have to know about them beforehand. So don't wait. Find out who those people are now. Find out those phone numbers now. Find out those contacts now, and write those things down somewhere in your important papers so that you have that information to go with you. One of the things that that was interesting in the important papers was wills and trusts and advance directives. So, it's really nice for seniors to have, we spend a lot of time putting our advance directives on paper. Please make sure that that's something that goes with you, because if there's, even in an emergency, you don't want to add another event to a heartbreaking event. You want to have your wishes followed as much as possible. So make sure your advance directives are in there for healthcare. Any questions? Any quick? I'm going to give you, when this is all over, come by this little table, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to pick out the things you would take in an emergency. And let's just see how you do. Blindfolded.
So, in the back, there are pet disaster kit checklists as well. I know that Some individuals have little signs that they might put on, like stickers that they might put on their window to alert emergency medical personnel that there's a dog or there's a cat in the house if you have to flee without your animals. At the Green Valley event, I learned a trick for, farm animals, large farm animals, and that was the spray paint on their rump your cell phone and let them loose. Because when they find them, they'll call that cell phone, and then you'll be able to get relocated to your large animals. So, the goats, the horses, the cows. Now, that doesn't apply so much for little dogs or little cats, but, making sure that you have IDs and ways that they can be safe, and ideally that you take them with you. But I also want to want to reiterate something. When the Atlas fire was here, the first thing I did was I went to my next door neighbors because they were elderly. And they don't really use, in fact, they don't even have a cell phone. They gave up the cell phone, which troubles me because I'm worried that how can we help them if they're not answering their landline. But it's the first thing I did was, are you aware of the fire? Are you prepared to evacuate? Do you have everything by your front door and ready to go? And just checked in with them, and they did. Thankfully, we didn't have to execute that, but I really do think you're absolutely right, Cindy. We must look out for one another. It's critical for all of our survival. So with that, what I want to do is introduce you to Nicole Howell, who is the Executive Director of Ombudsman Services, and she's going to talk about preparation and response in long-term care. And so let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank those folks who've already spoken tonight. Great information, and I think this is so important to be talking about. So as Rochelle said, my name's Nicole Howell, and what Ombudsman means is we actually protect the rights of those who live in long-term care. And I think many of us had hoped that as we age, if we do move into a care facility, that we don't have to worry about these basic things of life anymore, right? That somehow everyone would have cared for that. Do you have the clicker, Rochelle? I do. Can I have the clicker? Thank you. That we don't have to worry about these things anymore. But the truth is, what we have seen across the country over the last 10 years is that we indeed do. And I would say that really started with Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when there were people in long-term care that was attached to a hospital that did not have an evacuation plan, and those people were not cared for the way that they should. And I believe that lives were lost that did not have to be. And it continued as we've seen the hurricanes. And unfortunately, 2 years ago during the Tubbs fire, we saw the horrible consequences if a long-term care facility does not have an evacuation plan that is regularly rehearsed and drilled upon and shared with the residents and family members. And thankfully, the residents in Sonoma County all made it out safely because of the vigilance of a family member who alerted the facility, despite all of their very clear shortcomings. And so I've been an ombudsman almost 10 years. It's been something we've been working on in that period of time. You may not know that, almost 10 years ago, the San Bruno explosion, that there were actually 2 what are called residential care facilities for the elderly. What you might know as an assisted living facility were actually impacted, and the caregiver left them unattended. And so there were actually people that were in the rooms that were unable to evacuate themselves, had 2 bystanders in the neighborhood not felt like it was something important that they needed to investigate. And so that's why emergency preparedness is important wherever you may be living. And so I want to talk about today, I'm going to talk primarily about regulations affecting what you might know as assisted living. And that might be the big fancy assisted livings that are in your neighborhood. And it also means those tiny, what are called, sometimes we call them 6-bed facilities or boarded cares. But they're essentially, that's the same kind of facility. And over the last 10 years, the California legislature has realized this is indeed a problem and has increased the requirements and the protections for older adults who live in these facilities. This is very fancy. So again, we're going to talk about emergency preparedness in long-term care. So back in 2008, there was something called AB 749. And it outlined these kinds of things that facilities had to do to prepare themselves. Included sheltering in place for 72 hours, operating those assisted medical devices that some of us have talked about. And that was really sort of a shoring up of some regulations we already had, but it strengthened them. And you saw facilities and the industry at large start to worry about these kinds of things, because most of us had never thought we'd be without power for days on end, right? We assumed if there was an earthquake, it would pass and things would come on again. And we hadn't planned to deal with the daily living, right? Which is, how do we deal with going to the bathroom? How do we deal with clothing, with laundry piling up that may be soiled? And so they had to start to develop plans. But I think maybe it's because we're humans, we just are not that bright. We don't really learn from subtle nudges. And so over the last few years, there has been an increased movement. And so in 2018, it was AB 3098 that strengthened the regulation. And this code I have here on the right, that's just for nerds, that's our health and safety code, essentially. That's where the regulation lives. But essentially it said that not only do they have to have an emergency plan, but that all staff on all shifts have to be drilled on that plan at least once a quarter. And they have to provide for a varying degree of different kinds of emergencies. Like, you can't just train on earthquakes every time. It can be earthquakes in quarter 1 and fire in quarter 2, and maybe an earthquake-fire combo in quarter 3 and 4. But you have to mix those up. And staff have to know about those. Now, the thing that's important for you to know as consumers, because you guys are never going to live in long-term care. You're healthy, you're good, but maybe your neighbor might. So you might want to know these things. And that is that the residents aren't required to participate. So I remember being in kindergarten, we'd have like a fire drill, we'd meet out by the fire pole. And so I had to participate in the drill that my school was doing, right? We don't require that same things of long-term care facilities. And that's something that you should know. If your friend or family member is in a facility, you should be asking what their long-term care plan is. You guys have cameras at 2 different sides right now, so I'm not entirely sure what's to go from my good side. And really, for my social media, I'm just like, I don't know what to do. So some of the things they had to have is they had to have an evacuation chair at all stairways. So if you have 2 stairwells, you need to have an evacuation chair at both stairwells. And these seem like super common sense things, right? But they were things we hadn't thought of. You have to have a listing of all resident medications and all their conditions, and you have to have them in a go bag. So during the fires a year ago, there was large assisted living facilities. They don't have access to each of their sister facilities' records. But luckily, someone who was evacuating a facility in Sonoma, the CNA, she took a laptop and she locked it in the med cart, and it went with her over to Fairfield. So when she got to Fairfield with all of her residents, she knew all their medications. Tiny, tiny thing that she just was like, let's grab this, lock it in the med cart. So that those residents knew their medications, right? So you have to have all your medications in one place. You have to have all of their family members' contact information. These are things that we did not have. Again, 2 years ago, there was evacuations of a long-term care facility, and they ended up at an evacuation center in the Fairfield area, and they actually didn't have a plan of where they were going to go. So dementia is hard to deal with on a normal basis. It's really hard to deal with if you've been evacuated to an evacuation center sitting on a hard metal chair, right? These are not appropriate plans. So facilities have to know where they are going to go, if it's sort of a 5-mile plan, a 10-mile plan, or a further afoul. And so this goes on also, which is that each set of keys has to be available on all shifts to cars for evacuation. So if you have a friend or family member at a smaller facility, you might want to ask, what vehicle's available? Right? You might want to ask, how many people can that vehicle accommodate? Okay, if it can accommodate 4 people, what if 2 of those people have mobility devices? Right? Is the person the caregiver on shift, do they have a license? Do they know how to drive that car? Is it maybe a manual? So these are the kind of questions you have to be mindful of if someone is living in long-term care. And lastly, emergency plans are available to the residents on site. Any responsible party, local emergency responders, have the right to ask that information at any time, and my office. This is in addition to community care licensing. So that plan really should be a living, breathing document. I think 10 years ago, they lived on a lot of shelves. And I think now they're coming out more frequently. Because the fire season, frankly, is still going on, right? And so we have learned the lessons of all too many people whose lives have been lost, who were older adults who simply didn't have a plan in place, and our emergency response did not meet their needs. Because it doesn't matter if I get out if 10 of my older neighbors do not. So do you have any questions for me today? I'm like a barrel of sunshine. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, we're with the preschool in Benicia, and we were actually in the process of updating our evacuation plan because this is the first year we've been affected by the power outage. And we have 50 children 2 through 5. So I have the other end of the spectrum.
Bless you.
So our challenge has been, how do we do a one-way communication and contacting all of the parents if we have to evacuate? So we're thinking of like a group meet, but that sounds like that's a social thing. So for the facilities like this, how do you notify everyone? Are you calling them individually, which is what we've been doing in the past?
So the question is, so our friends in the back, they run, is it a daycare you said?
Preschool?
Preschool, so 2 through 5. So they've got 50 kids they are responsible for. And little people are more wily than older people. So they have to make sure that they are safe and that their parents have been notified. So I will tell you, community care licensing that covers this area is experiencing something, Cindy named it, called Everbridge. And that's the way in which they are sending out messages to facilities. I will tell you at my office, we're not quite that fancy, and so the first thing we start doing when we get notification of a PSPS or any other issue is we're on the phone with the facility. And we're asking a series of questions related to, did you know you're in the affected area? How many residents do you have? Because that shifts on a daily basis. What is your plan to evacuate? I'm asking, do you have residents on hospice? What durable medical equipment do you have? And then basic things like if you're using any sort of beds at elevator decline, like, okay, so what's your plan to have in a usable position? So I think that what I would look for is tech solutions like even Salesforce. You could send out a mass text to your constituency. But really agreed upon ways that how do we communicate with you, or even a quick email, really just having those contacts in a variety of places. Have the email list in the email. Maybe print out the email list also in a binder. Have it also saved on a thumb drive. So in my car at any point I have a binder of all the facilities across Solano, Contra Costa, and Alameda County. Their administrators' phone numbers, and how I reach out to all of them. So even if I am evacuated from my home or office, I have that information in my car. Yes, ma'am.
So you have someone, I have a friend whose husband is in a home facility, and you ask them those questions and you find out they don't. What do you do about it?
Good question. So what if you as a consumer or community member ask a facility these questions and they don't have the answers? And so the answer to that is, if you're not getting the appropriate answer from the staff member, you talk to what's called the administrator, and they're the licensee for that building. And you say, and they'll say, oh, no, we're good to go. And you say, no, I've asked this question and I'm not getting an appropriate answer, so I want to see your emergency plan, because you have the right to see that. I want to know when your last drill was, and I want to know when your next one is, because I want to participate. And if it, to me, this is the thing is, so what's interesting is the facilities that you're talking about are licensed the same as a daycare and preschool. Now, I've been through this daycare preschool thing a couple times with my friends' kids. They go there 45 times before they place their kid there. But we don't go to a facility 45 times before we place someone else there. And the thing with the kids is they're seeing a parent in the morning and the evening, but someone living in long-term care might go days, weeks, or months without seeing a family member. And so we need to take it as seriously as consumers as we would preschool and daycare. So it has to be asking the questions. And if you're not getting a satisfactory answer, you can contact me, the ombudsman, you can contact community care licensing, and we can get you that answer. Because we can no longer wait to have an appropriate plan in place. Anybody else? Well, I just want to thank you all. I'm so proud to be a part of a community that is coming out here to talk about these issues and find solutions. I now have my new best friends, Tim and Dawn, who we're going to just be besties with now, I can tell. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and I want to thank Rochelle for putting this together.
Thank you, Nicole. You know, she's dynamite. She's doing a lot of great things in the area of ombudsman beyond just this, so it's nice to have her as a guest. I wanted to point out again, there's even more information in here to keep referencing some of this. And then also in the go bag, you know, we talked about having go bags ready. Now this isn't a really good go bag, but it's a starter kit. It does have a flashlight, it has a whistle, it has a small first aid kit. But go through your checklist and begin to add and put someplace. And one of the things you can do is put photocopies of your important documents. For those of us who have cloud drives, I have things on a cloud drive. I actually, of all things, I have my health insurance card in my notes on my phone, because whenever I go see a doctor or something like this, I never carry my health insurance card, so at least I can find it and show it to them. But there's different ways to make sure you have that available, so you have to go in 30 seconds. You want to be able to go in 30 seconds. Yes?
I just want to make a quick thing about documents, because a lot of people, I don't even know how to use Cloud Drive, okay? So, one thing I suggest, and to me an emergency is just not natural catastrophes, it's also the death of a loved one or a loss of a job. But what I've done is I've taken all my credit cards, my driver's license, and I photocopied them, all on one side and on the other side. Then I emailed that to myself on a Yahoo one. Because if you have Comcast, you can't get into your Comcast, right, if you get rid of Comcast or Xfinity or whatever it is. But if you have Yahoo, you can go down to any local library and print that up if you've emailed it to yourself.
Good idea, or else put it in your go bag and have it there too and change it up. So our last speaker, saved the best for last, and not everybody's been fantastic, but I know that, so much that's important is really around the local response and what to do in the event of evacuation. And I'm thrilled to have Kevin Brown come talk to us. And with that, I'll just hand it over to you.
Good evening. As Rochelle pointed out, I'm Kevin Brown. I'm with the Vallejo Fire Department. So first, let me start by saying thank you, Rochelle, and for Florence Douglas Center for pulling this together. Thank you to all the audience members here too for coming and participating. So as I stated, I work for the Vallejo Fire Department. I'm a public information officer for them. I'm also the current EMS coordinator, so I run our medical aspects and training. I'm the lead wildland fire instructor for our academy, so it's part of the reason most of my PowerPoint will be focused around wildland fire emergencies. And then I'm the community outreach officer for IFF Local 1186. I doubt anyone is even wondering why, but in case you are wondering why I'm not in uniform, I was injured on the Glencoe fire, and so I'm on workers' comp at the moment, so I technically I'm not even allowed to wear my uniform. But other than that, I'm doing okay. So we'll talk about that fire a little bit, but I'm going to go through a PowerPoint that one of our senior captains produced following the massive fires in Sonoma and Napa in 2017. I've modified the PowerPoint to kind of fit this forum a little bit, but it's one of the best presentations I've ever received from him as far as just seeing how wide the effect is when we have these large-scale emergencies, and it's more than just losing homes and businesses to the fire. It's the trickle-down effect of the economy and the displacement, and how do you recover when the infrastructure is damaged? Just where do you go from there? So before I get into that, on the back table, there's two documents. They look almost identical, but I encourage you to grab them. So on the back table to my left, and looks like this. It's two-sided. So there's two copies of it because one, as you can see, has a watermark that says sample, so it's filled out as an example of how to fill it out. The other one's blank for you to fill out on your own. So this is a document I encourage you to take home. You fill it out and you keep it on your fridge, or I know my parents, where they live in Benicia, they keep it inside of one of their main cupboards right there in the kitchen. It's really easy to access. And the idea is in the case of that emergency where you're asked to evacuate, you grab the go bag and a few other things, but you grab this too. And so what this contains is an area to fill out important contact information for friends and family members, keeping in mind that your cell phone might not work, or at some point, if it's during a long-term power outage, you won't be able to recharge your cell phone or may not be able to recharge it. So you want to have these phone numbers recorded somewhere other than just in your phone, because your phone can't be, that phone might not be reliable. It's got an example list of items to grab real quick, ideally items that should be in your go bag. An area to put your home insurance information and your car insurance information, just the quick down and dirty, and the policy number and the phone number to call. And then probably two of the most important things at the top, it has a line here that says, my family's designated meeting point in case of an evacuation is, and the example on here, it says Cousin John Smith's house. So you want to pick like a family member but the next town over, somewhere outside of the immediate area. And the idea there is, what if your whole family gets evacuated, but what if family member A is at work, you're at home, your teenage child is at school, you all need to evacuate, you can't get a hold of each other, but you need to have a designated place where you're all going to meet. And then the last thing at the bottom is why it says, my emergency kit is located, with a blank, and on here it says, in the kitchen pantry bottom shelf. So that's an example location. But the idea behind this is you can grab that and reference it real quick. If you make one of these go bags, great. But you can probably all see how this might be that item that gets pushed aside and then buried in the back of a closet. And then when the time comes to need it, you forget where you put it because you're not touching it on a daily basis. So, having said that, I'll jump into the PowerPoint. So, as I stated, this covers the fires in Sonoma and Napa. It mostly focuses on the Tubbs fire, which is the fire that affected Coffee Park. And then there's, of course, areas in it where I'm going to relate it to what if something like this happened here in Vallejo. So on October 8th of that year, 2017, there was 3 large fires in Sonoma, 2 large fires in Napa. A total of 44 lives were lost throughout those fires. The Tubbs fire, although it wasn't the largest, it was the one that had the most impact. It had the most lives affected. So 36,000 acres, 21 lives lost. That's basically the Coffee Park area. 4,600 homes, 94 commercial buildings, and nearly 1,000 other buildings, like outbuildings, sheds, and whatnot that were destroyed. This is Coffee Park. Another picture of Coffee Park. The park you see in the middle of this picture is literally Coffee Park. That's the neighborhood is named after. The Nuns fire was 56,000 acres, 600 plus homes, 32 commercial buildings, another 600 secondary structures. This is a picture of that. Some of the guys doing work. The Pocket fire was actually the smallest of them all. It burned 3 homes and 3 secondary structures. Fortunately, no lives lost there. So here's a quick geographical rundown of where they're all located. The Atlas fire was the one that had the most impact on our region. It did burn into parts of Solano County. It's actually where I spent almost two solid weeks assigned to that fire. And so going back to the fire that affected Coffee Park, that's Santa Rosa. The City of Santa Rosa Fire Department, they serve a population of 175,000 people. They have 10 staffed fire stations that consist of 10 fire engines. Those are the big red engines that you see rolling around. They have the water on them. They have a water tank. And then 2 fire trucks. So the trucks are the ones that you see that have the large ladders on them. They don't carry water. And that equates to 41 firefighters of one capacity, another firefighter, captain, battalion chief that's on duty every day in that city. By comparison, we here in Vallejo, we serve a slightly smaller population, 125,000. We have 6 open fire stations, and that consists of 5 engine companies and 1 truck company, and sometimes actually 6 engine companies, depending on the daily staffing. And we have 22 fire personnel, so essentially half of what Santa Rosa has, but not half the population that we serve. I'm sure everyone here is aware, we suffered not just the recession in our region, but the bankruptcy in 2008, and ever since then it's been a struggle, to put it lightly, to get back to those staffing levels, really both for us and the police department, as the city rebuilt its budget and various other issues. And then it's surprisingly more expensive than you think to reopen a fire station. When you reopen a station that's been closed for close to 10 years, you have to redo everything because things stop working and has to be brought up to current codes. So there's a large sticker price of just trying to reopen the door to those closed fire stations. So here's what happened and why things went so awry so quickly in Santa Rosa and Coffee Park. A quick rundown of the events. So that fire department, Santa Rosa, was already working numerous smaller fires. We were in red flag conditions. That means we had high winds. It was very dry as far as fire fuels are. It was hot out. So they were having numerous other fires that they were inundated with. They're already stretched to their capacity with. And then, let's see if we get the next one, picture from that fire. Then the larger fire started to break out. So the way our state works, we're essentially split into north and south regions, but we have a northern operations center and a southern operations center when it comes to ordering resources, different fire resources. So the northern one's located in Sacramento. The county where this large fire is occurring, they'll call Sacramento OES, and then that OES center starts mobilizing resources all over the northern half of the state. But as you can imagine, there's a time delay in that. A couple phone calls need to be placed, then it trickles up to Sacramento, then it comes back down, and then like our phone at the Vallejo Fire Department will ring, hey, Santa Rosa needs fire engines, they need them now. Okay.
You talked a little bit slow slower your words are running together, like crazy. So
Sure.
one of these seniors here.
I appreciate it, yeah.
Slower, it's easier to pick out each word.
Sure thing, sure thing.
We're gonna
Okay. So then our phone rings, and so does every other fire department across Northern California, and they tell us they need our help. Now we got to mobilize, and we're supposed to be out the door within 60 minutes. We strive for 30 minutes, but we have to throw all the stuff on the fire engine that's going to last us for a week or plus of being gone out on these fires, right? So there's a time delay there, and then there's the driving delay to get there. And then once we get there, we have to check in and learn where in that region they want us, what part of the fire we're going to. Of course, we're learning the area because it's not an area we drive every day, right? So there's a delay there. And so in Santa Rosa, this fire moved so fast that by the time mutual aid resources were coming from farther just the next town over, it had already burned through Coffee Park, and they were overwhelmed. We couldn't get in there fast enough, resources-wise. So as an example, that fire, in the first 24 hours, they requested 300 fire engines for assistance. 130 arrived within the first 12 hours. That's actually phenomenal. We're even better now because we've learned from it. But never in California's history have we been able to get 130 mutual aid engine companies from all over Northern California to one location that fast. But even that wasn't enough. They said they wanted 300. 130 is what they got. So this is essentially northern Santa Rosa. The areas you see outlined in red are the areas that were evacuated early on during this fire. Just by comparison, this top left box you see here, that's roughly the size of North Vallejo. So imagine evacuating all of North Vallejo like that. And I'll get into how chaotic that can become in the next few slides. And then keep a look at the time. So that's at midnight. So this was an evacuation where everyone had to be woken up. People weren't awake, right? There's a fire burning up the hillside adjacent to them, but they're deep in slumber, right? So doors are getting pounded on. People imagine that, right? You have no idea why a firefighter's kicking in your front door at midnight, and then you look out the window and see the hillside's on fire. So all these pictures, as I go through them, they're all from those Sonoma area fires. So the way we word it is we have incident priorities, and when an emergency of that size occurs, our number one priority is life safety and evacuation. So that's what they were in there. So there was a lot of questions early on as, there's videos and there's pictures of these fire engines going through town, and there's a house burning down right there, and they're driving past it. During that first window of time, the first 12 to 24 hours, there was almost zero attempt to even put out the fire. It was get through these neighborhoods, knock on all those doors, and get the people out of here. If we had to choose between fighting one house fire or evacuating a whole city block, we were going to evacuate the city block for obvious reasons. Law enforcement, of course, was assisting with the evacuations. Redcom, that's the name of their local dispatch center. Redcom was receiving over 300 calls per hour of everyone saying, there's a fire, I'm stuck. So think about what that equates to, right? A lot of those calls weren't getting answered. And now we got citizens, of course, reasonably so, upset that they're calling 911 and we're not even picking up the phone. Every one of those phone calls takes several minutes, right? And then the dispatcher has to get to a point where I can't talk to you anymore, I have to hang up because I have to take the next call, right? And they're trying to prioritize the calls. They're trying to pull out the information where maybe someone's saying they're stuck and they can't evacuate. That way we can send the right resource to that address versus the person who's just calling to say there's a fire behind my house. Well, we know that because it's everywhere. So at 3 a.m. is when it moved into the Fountain Grove area. So again, that's part of Coffee Park area. And so from midnight to 3 a.m. is where it went from the Wildland region outside of Santa Rosa to where it reached Santa Rosa. So again, 3 a.m., no one's awake, or mostly. This is the Kaiser Hospital being evacuated. We kind of have some talks on facilities being evacuated. Imagine how difficult that is when so many of the patients are non-ambulatory. This is a care facility being evacuated. So the fire crosses Highway 101. Something that I've been a firefighter since 2008. I would have never thought I would watch a fire jump a 6 to 8 lane freeway. They're not supposed to. we had a staging area, so that means for us, that's where we show up to check in at. We always pick it, we actually have pre-designated areas. The staging areas are usually like a local fairgrounds or a large parking lot, and they're pre-designated. And so when we get the call to go somewhere, they'll say, hey, report to these fairgrounds. Okay, that's where we drive to, we check in, and then they send us out to fight the fire. The staging area they picked was well far enough away and safe from where this fire started. And within the first, I think it was in the first 2 days, they had to move the staging area because it burned over. So the area that we were supposed to go to, now we're showing up and there's, that area is on fire. We don't know who to check in with, and we haven't been given the updated staging area because it's not on the printout that we got from state OES since it changed during our drive time. This is Highway 101 shut down to all traffic. Yes, more pictures obviously from the fire here. It's not just homes that are lost, it's the local businesses, right? So not only is the business lost, but now those individuals are out of work, so there's the economic impact from that. It reaches Coffee Park, residents are fleeing. So the biggest part of that, we'll get some pictures of this, is that's tens of thousands of people that we're dumping into the roadways all at once, creating the worst traffic jam in that region's ever seen, because we've never had that many individuals all get on the roadway so quickly. And at the same time, we're trying to drive into that neighborhood, and so now we can't get in because the roads are packed and people are trying to get out. This is it, the fire moving through Coffee Park. Again, this is one of those things when we show up in our one fire engine, we're not even going to put a dent in that, right? So it's entirely focused on evacuation. The reason this picture's in there, this is Vallejo Fire Captain John Lane. He actually lives in Santa Rosa. He was off duty the day this fire started. He happened to have some of his gear with him. He didn't come into work, he just went straight to where the fire was in his pickup truck and tried to do what good he could. Again, more businesses and homes affected. And now this one might not hit you, it's so impressive until I give you the description of what we're looking at here. Obviously, as neighborhoods are burning through, so are cars. So this main car in the picture here is upside down. It's not upside down because it was in a vehicle accident. It's upside down because the thermal energy of that fire as it moved through lifted the vehicle and turned it over.
Wow.
Same thing here. All right, so eventually, forward progress of the fire has been stopped. As a result, 43 shelters in that area were opened. Obviously, law enforcement's a big part of being brought in as well. It's not just firefighters that are asked to come from mutual aid. They need additional law enforcement assistance. And then you have these issues, right? You have the opportunists, if you will, that are looting the evacuated areas. And so then we bring in the National Guard to keep the peace. So if you guys might see them sometimes on the news, they mobilize pretty quick too, and they're essentially in there. Don't get me wrong, they actually do a lot of stuff, but their primary thing there is just keeping areas shut down, as far as evacuated areas and traffic control. But I've seen them side by side with us on the fire lines at times, fighting the fire as well. Again, as you can tell, this was a neighborhood. You can see the chimneys that remain standing. They actually let residents back into certain parts of Coffee Park like 2 days later, and then realized, wait, we can't do this. It's a hazardous. There's hazmat all over. There's hazardous materials that have been released. There's propane tanks and imagine everything that's in your garage at home. Paint thinners, maybe gasoline. So they had to tell people that for the first time they got to go back into their neighborhood, and in that same day, like the local authorities had to say, we were wrong. You have to leave again. You have to leave now. So a couple of pictures of shelters that were opened. And then we have the large animal issue. So not quite as many large animals to deal with here in Vallejo, but we do have them on the north side of town and in certain county areas. But nonetheless, it's that next level, right? We're thinking about life safety, and which fire was it? I was on the Atkins fire. Driving down Dry Creek, I think it was, Dry Creek Road. We couldn't get through not because of cars trying to leave the area, because goats were blocking the roadway, and they wouldn't get out of our way. They didn't understand, what was going on. And then the cleanup starts. So these are propane tanks. They couldn't let anyone back in, although they did initially. They couldn't let anyone back in until the area was cleaned of at least most of all the hazardous materials that remained. So all the propane tanks had to be pulled out, all the cars. I know that this is impossible to see. I've given this presentation, this PowerPoint a few times. I get that this is an impossible to see picture. But what I can point out about it, what it's showing, the very top of the slide, the border that you see here is the footprint of that fire. The very top area is where it started at 9:43 p.m. And then as it burns down, where you see the red, those are the homes that burned. So at 9:43 it started. At 1 a.m. is where it started to kind of reach populated areas. And from 1 a.m. to, well, here's 3 a.m. I can't see the last time point, but all of this occurred in like a 3-hour window. That's a lot of land to burn with a lot of homes in it. Just proof of, or unfortunate proof of how fast this fire moved. So as of the last estimate we found, it was they're saying $9.4 billion just from the Tubbs fire, and that cost is continuing to climb. A total of 8,900 buildings destroyed, 44 fatalities between all the fires, 192 injuries. So what do we do? How do we prepare for this? So this isn't going to be expected of you, of course, but from our local authorities and city and the county, we need to start building better fire-adapted communities. So areas that we feel are prone to fire, we need to lay them out in a way that allows for evacuation, but it has built-in fire breaks as well. There's a great picture, I actually removed it from the slide, now I'm almost regretting it. That same area, Santa Rosa Coffee Park, burned in, it was either 1964 or 1966. The fire footprint is almost identical, almost identical. So the point there being, if it burned once, it will burn again. And frankly, it'll burn again in 60 or 70 years. And the question is, are they going to be ready for it? So what are fire resilient landscapes? Healthy open areas, so we don't want dead trees and dead vegetation accumulating. Defensible space, and that's really referring to the area right around your home. So I'm sure we have a variety of living situations here between those that have a single family home that you live in versus an apartment building or a care facility. If you if you live at a single family home though, keep your yards clear. There's some pictures I'll show that describe that. Keep your yards clear, keep the dead vegetation to a minimum, keep your trees pruned, and then prevent clutter and debris buildup. The next picture, we'll get to it. There's some pictures that depict that. If you live in an apartment building, hammer your complex manager to make sure they're doing that type of work, right? When we go into these large-scale fire areas, and if we get to a neighborhood where the fire hasn't reached yet, but we know it's going to get there maybe in the next 24-hour cycle, we go through with these almost obnoxiously colored yellow placards, and it's not that we rate the buildings, but we score them, we grade them on how likely they are to be saved. And if the house is overgrown, terribly overgrown with trees and dead vegetation built up, that house gets marked as unsavable, and we move to the next house. Because when the fire does reach that point, we need to prioritize where our resources are working as well. And we can't, the fire engines only carry between 400 and 500 gallons of water. And during these wildfires, we're very, very rarely tying into hydrants because once you're connected to a hydrant, you can't move to the next house quickly. So when we have to prioritize these structures, if we see a totally unsavable house here and a very savable house here, we're not going to waste our gallonage on the unsavable house because we're going to wind up losing both homes then. Yes.
Okay. I'm just wondering, when our previous fire happened, people were laughing at me because I was starting to save water before that ever happened, and for the power outage. And after, sure enough, they said, Vallejo was, we had the emergency water. Why are we not using the water in the bay right here instead of the reserve frozen?
So there has to be a system in place to allow for that, right? We have to have a way to pull that water. And as a matter of fact, Vallejo Fire Department does have a way for that. We have a portable water, we call it PWSS, portable water supply system that we house. We got it think in the 90s, but it still works very well because it doesn't have to get used all that often. It contains a mile of large diameter hose, and it's essentially a portable water main system. And we can install portable, once they're put in that place, they're there for a period of time, but hydrants into that line. So we could draft directly out of the bay with it. The issue is it's a very large truck with a very large trailer on it. It's housed at one of our storage facilities here in town. Someone has to go over there to go pick it up. That's to get driven to where it's needed because we can't just have them available everywhere. It's to get driven to where it's needed. It's going to take 3, 4, 5 firefighters to set it all the way up. It's going to take an hour or 2 to get in place. Would you rather have those 3 to 5 firefighters performing that operation or fighting the fire that's occurring? Right? We can't have it in place ahead of time because we don't know where the fire is going to be, and we can't have enough of them placed all over town. So we do have a system in place for that. The actual intent and design of why we purchased it over 2 decades ago was because of the Loma Prieta earthquake. The idea was if we have an earthquake that ruptures our water main system, we want a way to be able to replace that system for an extended period of time to some degree. But we, of course, decided, we can use this to pull water from the bay. But again, there's a process and period that it takes to replace that. If we didn't have a solution to that water emergency at the time, and the city rented a very large generator to keep our pumps running, I guarantee you that wouldn't have been put into use. But we didn't quite have to get to that point. That would have been the next, plan B. So there's so many ways to get emergency alerts now, but none of them are perfect. So what we have here is a list of ways that you can stay connected. I highly recommend following as many of them as you can based on what platforms you have. I'm sure probably most people in this room have some form of a smartphone now, but I imagine not everyone. Our Vallejo firefighter social media, we do everything we can to be as informative on there as early and quickly as possible when there are these emergencies. But even we can't be perfect on it, and this is why. There's 3 of us that run all the collection of all those pages, the Nextdoor website, our Facebook page, our Twitter page, our Instagram page. And all 3 of us, one of them is myself, and the 2 others are 2 other public information officers we have. When the large fire starts, it's kind of the same thing like the argument I just gave with our portable water supply system. When the large fire starts, either I'm out there fighting fire, or I'm sitting at a computer somewhere putting out emergency alerts. Which one's the better use of me as a resource?
Emergency alert. Fire.
It was pretty crazy making to have Comcast go out for 3 days. Are they going to have some kind of a backup generator plan? Because we couldn't, the internet was out, I couldn't text or phone. I did that, a lot of that triple placement, and so everything was out. I couldn't turn on the news. They should have backup systems, don't you think?
My answer is that yes, they should. A lot of that's tied into PG&E and then the new PSPS scenarios that we're running through these days. So I guess the best way I can answer that is...
That's what people go for.
Sure, of course. So I can tell you, us as speaking for the fire department, we have learned how to communicate very well with, of course, with each other and the neighboring fire departments, with the local police agencies, with county agencies. We're only learning now that we need a way to have PG&E give us all the pertinent information right now. They're not built into that network. They were doing, to an extent, the best they could to give us information, but as we all saw, myself as both a resident here and as an employee for the Vallejo Fire Department, they put out an informational blast that said these areas may be affected. You check it, and then you hear from probably a friend, I think they updated it. You go back and now you're not on the list. And then you hear it, and then now you are on the list. And it ends up when they actually implemented it, wasn't even, it wasn't entirely accurate to what they had most recently published. So they're spinning their wheels trying to figure out how they need to operate. And the best way I can even answer that, probably the next step is that I think it's Deanne Contreras. She's the main PIO for PG&E. She and I have spoken on the phone dozens of times over the last couple of years. So when all this was going on, I'm like, I'm going to call Deanne. I'm going to get the answer from the person who should have it. She couldn't return my call for 3 days because you know what every other fire department public information officer in Northern California was doing? They were calling Deanne Contreras, right? So I left multiple voicemails, but I think by the 3rd time I tried calling her, the subscriber you're trying to reach has a full voicemail box, right? Everyone. So we're having to build a way get information from someone we didn't think was going to need to, wasn't going to have that level of effect on our community by shutting off an entire region's power supply. I see a hand in the back.
Yeah. I have a comment to what you just proposed. What would be your better use of time? My answer would be to be the person giving out that social media information. So one of my issues when we just had the fire that just happened here, our preschool is in Benicia. I'm retired police, so I kind of know how this stuff works. I called the dispatcher because we didn't have notification. Parents are calling us, and I wanted to know if there was a shelter in place because a parent told us there was a shelter in place. The dispatcher told me, go to social media. And I was like, is that a joke? And to me, that wasn't a good enough answer because one, I was on the phone with her. Two, again, I have these children that I'm taking care of. And that was important information. And three, Facebook, that information it changes depending on who you're following. So I think the point of this whole thing tonight is where do we go to get the correct information? Because PG&E, they definitely need a whole bunch of help with their system. If they're going to be shutting us down, we need to know where to go to get the information. If I need a radio, okay, that's fine. What station am I dialing? If I'm going to social media, well, which one is actually going to have the most accurate? And we know it's going to constantly be changing, but there needs to be someone there making that information change. So that's just my comment.
No,
so
absolutely. It's a great comment.
I would have you stay.
Yeah. So here's how we work. Every department's slightly different, but the Vallejo Fire Department. I'm currently a 40-hour-a-week employee. Barring the injury at the moment. But so I work 10-hour days, Monday through Thursday. The vast majority of our employees work 24-hour shifts, right? Which is what I was until I took this coordinator position. So I am a PIO. We have Aaron Clobber's a PIO, Dan Gutierrez is another PIO with us. Those guys are both still on the 24-hour shifts. So when the fire breaks out, they're on the fire engine. They're part of the initial dispatch. So they're already out there, flowing water on the line. And so we have to stop and go, we have to find a way to replace you and get you out of the fire so that way we can go back to a desk. For me, if it's Monday through Thursday, that's immediately what I do. I'm at the computer. I've got multiple radios working, so I'm listening to all radio traffic. At the first available opportunity, I travel. I did this for the Mare Island fires that occurred a month and a half ago. I travel out to the command post location of running the fire, and I set up a mobile hotspot. I'm there with the incident commander. I've got my laptop, a hotspot, and I'm putting out the information the moment it's happening. If it's not Monday through Thursday, I live in town, I almost always come in. But I might be out of town visiting in-laws, right? So my point is, even though I am a public information officer, the Vallejo Fire Department doesn't have any public information officer where that's their sole job. It's because we're stretched so thin resource-wise. Just as an example, a really good friend of mine, Brian Santoni with Alameda County Fire Department, he just convinced them to make him a full-time PIO. So that is his job now. He used to be the guy that drove the fire engine, and he was a PIO. And it got to the point where public information officer. Public information officer. Acronyms, right? So he finally convinced his chiefs, as much as he loves fighting fire, that there's that benefit there, and someone needs to just be dedicated to that. Which I've moved towards that direction now that I'm this 40-hour employee. I work Monday through Thursday. But even still, if I'm working an overtime day on Saturday, I'm getting called to the fire, and my job is to start fighting fire. And then at some point, when we have enough resources there, the incident commander will pull me out and put me back to that.
But I think that's our job as the people sitting in this room. I mean, again, when I was police, if an emergency happened, you weren't 40 hours. You couldn't get off.
Yeah.
So the importance of police departments and fire departments need to be to providing the service. So if everybody in this room needs to write and say, hey, we need a social media person, period, died. Because some people didn't know where to go. She went to one place and there were no signs.
Right.
I'm calling, you're telling me to go to Facebook. We all need to have the right information so we're not like the slides you just showed and we're running around like the goats in the road not knowing where to go. So
I
If
agree.
that's what we need to do,
It's-
then that's what we need to do.
100% agree. And that's what it's going to take is enough vocal outcry, maybe to say, of our upper administration hearing that, yes, it's going to cost, maybe $100,000 a year to create this new position where now this person's working there and that's their job. But we live in a city that's budget strapped, right?
Yeah.
So, yes.
Would there not be a central public information officer within the city of Vallejo? Like you're being all fireman and superhero getting done?
Just hired.
Okay, all right.
Yep. So we're moving in the right direction.
All right.
Just
But it
hired.
seems
Like literally like a
a
week
skill
ago.
set, sort of superhero
Yep.
and then like
Yeah.
super great.
So I am a public information officer, but that is not, I did not get in the fire department, the fire service to be that. I became that, the reason I am a, yes, exactly, necessity. The reason I'm a Vallejo Fire Department PIO, why I got selected as one, is because the fire chief from several years ago saw me enough coming in from home on these, he's like, you're always here. Yeah, I live in town, I care a lot about this community. Like, okay, we're gonna make you the person that's always talking to the community then, right? So, yeah, but we need to get to where that's established. Let's start here.
I'm just gonna say, it's always good not to keep all your eggs in one basket though. Because, if you're only relying on him for information, what if his computer's down? What if he can't get that information?
But you need to have something.
Yeah,
You have to have
I agree.
something.
But what I was gonna say is when the Martinez fire happened, we were without power for 2 days. I had no cell phone service. And I went to Facebook and before my cell phone went out, I said, does anybody know what's going on? I could see the smoke right in front of my house, but I didn't know what was going on. And so somebody, wrote on there, I couldn't respond, but I could see that that's what happened. Not only that, but when my sister-in-law calls me, PG&E has on their website, put your address in, and it will tell you whether you're in danger of a power outage. Well, she put my address in, and it told her that I was in no danger, and I'd already been out of power for 8 hours. So that's what I'm saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because you never know where it's gonna be.
I'll answer this question, and then I'll talk a little more of where we're moving to fix exactly that in this situation. Yes.
I just wanted to say that I think when we're saying explore social media, that it might be helpful somewhere along the line to actually establish particular pages. Like, those of us who use Facebook are familiar with Vallejo Happenings, which is pretty crappy. It's got 30,000 people on it. Most of the people don't even live in the local area. There's a lot of argument and, talk going on there that is not helpful. However, it is part of where we probably get our initial info, but I don't know if like the city of Vallejo or county of Solano or, because they do have pages, I don't really remember seeing so much just from those in particular.
So what I'll say to that is, although we're still not perfect, I believe that Vallejo firefighters, and that's what it's called, it's not called Vallejo Fire Department, it's just Vallejo firefighters, that page, which is the page I run with a handful of other people, is probably the best local page, just Vallejo specific page that puts out emergencies. Because, again, I live here in town, my radio at home, my wife hates this, does not turn off. And so when the big fires happen, even in the middle of the night, the pager wakes me up. And even if I'm not going into the fire, I'm walking into the office I have in my house, and then I'm running it at midnight, off the clock for free. But I'm doing it because I know it's important. But most importantly, looking at the bottom here, Alert Solano. That's where things are moving, and all the cities in one way or another are already on board with it. But we're getting even better. Vallejo's probably lagging behind most of the other county cities, but we just hired a CDPIO, and part of their job will be communicating with the Emergency Operations Center for the county that will be pushing out those alerts. So if you visit alertsolano.com, you can sign up for those. They'll do it in a variety of ways. You can sign up for anything and everything from text messages to phone calls. I guess that's probably really it. But and then push alerts, like where it's not a text, you get a push alert on your phone. And it's not a perfect system yet, but it's gotten vastly better just in the last couple of months. So I highly recommend signing up for that one. So that's the one. Hopefully, with your cell phone working, with cell coverage working, you'll get that push notification. And if you have a landline still at your house, you can sign that number up too for the automated call to come reach you. And that's going to be. It's already getting pretty good, but once it's completely set up and in place, that will be the best way here in Solano County to get those alerts, because you don't have to go find the right Facebook page. The message gets pushed out to your phone. The same way Amber Alerts do. I'm sure everyone's got an Amber Alert text. It's just like that. And then here's a little ad for it. So this is relatively small fire, but just outside of Hidden Brook. It's really just a slide that's in here to show, right, like we have a lot of wildland area that could burn as well. If we have a fire up in that general area, it's north of town, of course, right? 95% of the year, no problem, because the winds blow the opposite direction. Today is a north wind. That fire starts today in that location, and it wants to burn towards town. So getting back to what's been talked a lot by all the presenters so far is having your own evacuation plan. So again, I encourage you to grab the flyer that I placed on the back table. It gives you some recommended steps to take and also some areas for you to customize and fill in yourself so you know what to grab and where to go. I've been asked a few times, both recently and in the past, what is Vallejo's evacuation plan? It doesn't work that way. Some cities have an evacuation plan, most don't. It's because you can't have a one thing fits all evacuation plan because it depends on where the emergency is, what type of emergency it is. So we can't have an evacuation plan that says everyone go this way. But what if the fire's this way, right? So really the point is you need to have your own evacuation plan, and to do that, maybe on the next slide, I'll come to it. Know two ways out of your community. Now, there's two parts of town where that's not possible. Lynn Cove, you just have Lynn Cove Parkway, and Hidden Brook, because you just have Hidden Brook Parkway. But barring that, don't just rely on Springs Road as your way to reach the freeway. Know the next best route. And the reason being, you never know when the road's going to be closed. We're probably not going to have trees like this all over the place, maybe a few, right? Blocking roadways. But you are just going to have the natural traffic issues from so many cars dumping onto the roadway at once. You might have a power pole, PG&E pole come down. But it's so easy for a roadway to get blocked because of the emergency. So don't rely on your normal driving path. No, be familiar with your area and having secondary routes out. It's been talked about plenty. Have a go bag ready at all times. Make sure everyone in your family, everyone in your household knows that plan, which is what makes that flyer so important. I would highly recommend putting it on your fridge, the reason being that you see it every day, right? So when you say collectively plan with your family, Cousin John's house in Benicia is going to be our designated meeting point, and you see that every time you open up your freezer door. If you forget to grab that paper, or you couldn't grab it because you weren't even home when the evacuation was put in place, you saw that every day times however many days you had that posted on your fridge, so it's going to stick, right? So you're going to remember it. We've talked about some of this with the other presenters, but a list of important documents to have some way or another duplicated or safe. So I'll give some examples, but the list here is, of course, insurance policies, passports, birth certificates, important family photos, heirlooms, tax documents, anything that has to do with your financial well-being, cash. Have in your go bag, have at least $20. It depends on what you can afford to set aside, but $100 set in that bag, because the wherever you go to buy your next supplies, they might not have an operating system that can accept your credit card. Plus, no matter where you go, in some way, shape, or form, you can barter with that cash. I can't, if I'm out of water and I'm trying to convince the person I came across to give me some of their water, I can't just wave a credit card in front of them, right? But you might be able to lure them with cash. So what I do, just to make this kind of more real, I have two different thumb drives, and every so often, so all the important documents are scanned and loaded onto those thumb drives, but then every so often, especially if I make like a big purchase for my house, which has been a long time, but if I bought a brand new TV, I walk around my house with my cell phone and I record the whole house, and then I upload or email that video to myself, and then I put that on those thumb drives. And one of those thumb drives stays in a bag that I basically carry with me everywhere, and the other thumb drive stays in the fireproof safe inside my house. And then that way, when I have to call AAA, my insurance company, and say, no, really, I have, this TV that you need to replace, like, trust me, it's in this video, see? Plus, that will also prompt you to remember the things you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. You watch the video and you go, oh, that's right, I forgot I had, purchased the new Alexa device, right? And I want that replaced too. And then actually, while I have my phone out.
And we're just we're at time, so.
Okay. So I'm going to throw this out one. So you're probably always going to bring your cell phone with you, but your cell phone might not work. I have a sticker that I taped to the inside of my phone case. I wife's phone number, the neighbor's phone number. Maybe this dies, but it's probably gonna be in my pocket. But I still have a way to, right? Granted, I do have my wife's cell phone number memorized. I don't have a work cell phone memorized, but that's here along with other.
Well, not everybody is tech savvy. Two things I thought of when I made my last list is, some of us still have a paper photo album. Phone book. So I'm gonna grab that, because phone might not die, you might lose it in all the chaos. So I'm in a paper phone book, and a lot of those documents, remember the old safety deposit boxes? You know, I have a lot of the copies of everything in my safety deposit box, but it's a photo album, you know, those sentimentals. And a little tiny book, to read, if you get bored Looney Tune in the children's 3 days, those little tiny books. And the last thing is those Sunday through Saturday pillbox things. You can make, you know, all your favorite supplements and prescriptions and stick that in your go bag.
So, because we're out of time, I'm going to jam through just a couple things real fast. Whether you're the homeowner or you rent, keep your gutters clean. It's the number one thing that causes homes to burn down when a wildfire comes through. We drive through an area and go, okay, these homes look all safe, but we have to keep going to where the fire's at, and then we could drive back through the next day, and several of those homes burned down because embers got into the gutters and smoldered and finally caught the house. So tell your landlord to clean it, or get the local 13-year-old that needs $20 on the weekend. This is defensible space. We kind of talked about it. Just keep your yards clear, maintain your property. Don't have a yard like this. Pay 1-800-GOT-JUNK to get this out of there, because we're not going to try to get through this. We're going to go to the next house that's savable, and this is all fuel that can burn and catch your house on fire. And know how to operate gates if they're electronic. Have a way to bypass the electronic gate if you have that. Let's get through some of this. The last 3 slides. I've always been trained, and I still maintain this. I do not tell people to shut off their gas when they're evacuating. The only time I tell people to shut off their gas is when they smell it. The reason being, when you come back, your house probably didn't burn, but you're getting let back into the area, you'll need to turn it back on. The pilot lights in your house are not on. And some of you might know how to relight your pilot light, but what I don't want is you to forget about a certain pilot light, it's leaking. Newer appliances have safety devices, so they don't do this, but if you have an older gas-powered appliance, you're leaking natural gas in your house, and then that, you can see where that's a problem too, right? So only turn off your your gas, if you actually smell it, meaning there's already a leak occurring. And then, if you have, this isn't necessarily specific to wildland fires, we go on a lot of calls where like the power strip is old and it fails and it starts to spark. No ways other than just unplugging a device on how to shut the power off to your house. And the most obvious being, go to your electrical panel and switch that main power switch. So if you have an emergency, call us, call 911. But that power strip starts to smoke and burn, shut off the breaker. And the last slide is your water shut off. So this is one we get at least, a dozen calls a year where maybe a toilet just keeps running because a valve in it breaks, or just any of your faucets, a valve breaks, and now your house starts to flood because it's just a constant flow of water. There's 2 ways to shut off the water to most properties. And the first, they call this the hose bib. So it's probably your front yard water hose connection. The small valve that you see there, it's the same one here. It's just turn right to close, and that shuts off the water to your house. The secondary way, if you can't figure that out, can't locate it, if in your front yard you have this water labeled box, that's your water meter. The meter's inside there. And there's this valve. That one's harder to turn. You don't necessarily need a special tool, but it can be tough to turn, but that's the second location, right? So if you have an emergency where a pipe bursts, that's how you shut off the water to your house. We get a good handful of those calls. It takes us 5 minutes to get there after the 911 call, but the person was frantic for 15 minutes trying to figure out why their bathroom's flooding, and by the time we get there, there's so much damage done. I mean, we stopped the water, of course, at that point, but 15 minutes of free-flowing water. I had it happen in my house a couple years ago. Thank God I was home, and I talked to my wife afterwards. Would you have known how to shut the water off? She goes, no. I go, all right, come out with me. We're going to go through a little tutorial. So that covers it. Hand it back over to you. I'll take questions afterwards. I want, we're at time, but I'll be here. Feel free to pull me aside, and I'll answer any questions I can. And the flyer, again, at the back left table, I highly recommend grabbing.
First of all, Kevin, sorry that we ran out of time because this is really great information. I don't know if you all know this, but ember can travel up to a mile under right conditions. So it's really...
The fire The fire in Carquinez, when Glen Cove area was burning, that was an ember from our fire that crossed the strait.
So it's really important for us to clean out those gutters and take care of those shrubs. So that's how that happens. We do have, first of all, thank you all for coming. I also wanted to thank North Bay Retirement Center because they helped contribute to the food that was available here, and all the sponsors that made this possible. So thanks again to all of you.